Alliant Title II countdown, last minute moves before key compliance deadlines. So, as I'm sure a lot of you are hopefully not painfully aware, we have 1 month and 2 days until the first Title II deadline, April 26th of 2026. So that is rapidly approaching, and we've brought in some members of our team and then also Brian, a guest speaker here to kind of talk about what can you be doing to get yourself ready, whether you're at the starting line or you are well along that race towards your accessibility journey. So I am Amy Waldorf. I am the partnership manager here at Alliant. I will be moderating today, and I am joined by Aaron and Brian. Aaron, I'll pass it to you to introduce yourself.
Awesome. Thank you, Amy. Hi, everybody, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Aaron Page. I am Vice President of Accessibility at Alliant. Wear a number of different hats. I run what we call our Live Our Values program. It's our internal accessibility initiative. I do a lot of accessibility evangelism, so webinars, conferences, trainings, that sort of thing on behalf of Alliant. I happen to be blind, was born with congenital glaucoma, lost my remaining functional vision 17, 18 years ago now. Been working in the disability and accessibility space for more than a decade, the last 8 years of which have been with Alliant. Prior to that, I was actually doing accessibility procurement testing at the University of Montana, a Title II entity. So this is a topic that is pretty near and dear to my heart. It's back where I started. And so with that, Brian, I will pass it over to you for you to do your introduction.
Thanks so much, Aaron. Thanks, Amy. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Brian Stafford. I work with the Colorado Governor's Office of Information Technology and as a digital accessibility solutions engineer and consultant. I'm dedicated to ensuring our state digital products and services work for everyone. I partner with a portfolio of large agencies to advise, design, and implement modern accessibility standards for their different solutions. Glad to be here.
Thank you, Brian. And thank you, Aaron and Brian. Thank you both for joining. In terms of our agenda for today, we've just gone through welcome and introductions. Brian will be giving us an overview of Colorado OIT, Office of Information Technology. That is the organization that he works for. And then I will give a brief overview of Alliant and who we are. We will talk through requirements, so Title II compliance and key deadlines. We're going to have AP, Aaron Page, share some insight on that. And then we're going to come off of the screen share here and do a Q&A, kind of talking through Brian's experience of implementing accessibility across the state of Colorado. And then lastly, we will share some last moves that you can make for high impact results in the next month before this comes into effect. And we will save some time at the end for questions and answers. So let's go ahead and get into it. We have a lot to cover. So Brian, I'm going to pass it back over to you to share a little bit about OIT.
Sure. Thanks, Amy. I can be pretty brief here. As the company or department, if you will, that serves about 19 or 20 departments at the state of Colorado, the Governor's Office of Information Technology, where I work, is focused on serving our agency partners, right? All of our different agencies like transportation, education, public health, agriculture, you name it, right, end up giving and providing services to citizens. So my specialty for the last 4 years has really been around a set of about 5 or 6 different pieces of legislation related to digital accessibility here in our state. That dates back to the original House bill known as 211110, and it really changed the landscape for how we build and design and deliver digital government services. So I'll be focusing a little bit on that here later during the Q&A portion of the presentation.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Brian. And I will touch on this again later, but I do think it's worth saying House Bill 211110, for those of you who are not Colorado natives, very closely mirrors the requirements of Title II. So it's all very applicable. It just went into effect earlier. So we've kind of had here in Colorado a little bit of a head start and a peek into the future for the rest of the nation. So, in terms of who Alliant is actually a combination of 3 leaders in the accessibility space that were blended together about 5 years ago. So, that was T-Base Communications, Common Look, and Accessible 360. All became one company under the name Alliant, and we are the market's most trusted end-to-end accessibility solution provider. So, we operate across PDF accessibility, web audit and digital accessibility, and alternative format and braille printing. So that is a little bit about Alliant. We're not going to get in too deep on that. We're going to go ahead and turn it over to AP to talk about requirements, Title II compliance requirements, and key deadlines.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Amy. Okay. So to start off, two disclaimers just want to get out of the way here. First off, obviously, nothing in this presentation is meant to be legal advice. This is all intended to be purely informational. The second disclaimer, and some of you who are keenly watching the Title II space might be aware of this. There's a lot of focus or a lot of attention on a potential interim final rule that may adjust or change these Title II regulations. As it stands right now, that is in an interim stage. It hasn't actually been adopted. The language is not public, so we don't actually know what that is yet, if it were to actually be adopted at all. So for right now, for the purposes of this presentation, we're going to move forward with the Title II regulations as they are, not as how they might change. And so just wanted to kind of get that clear. Obviously, if you want to keep an eye on this, follow Alliant, keep an eye on us on LinkedIn. We'll have more information if those regulations do change. So with those out of the way, so what do the regulations actually require? So in a nutshell, they essentially require all the Title II entities. So state and local governments tends to be a shorthand, but that can include special purpose districts, police departments, fire departments, school districts, you name it, right? So it's not necessarily just state and local governments, but it requires any Title II entity to ensure that their web content, electronic documents, and their mobile applications are conformant with WCAG, the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, version 2.1, level AA. It applies to state and local governments as well as the vendors who supply them with technologies. The key deadlines for it, as Amy said right at the start, we have 1 month and 2 days. So April 26, 2026 is the first deadline. That is for larger organizations serving a population of more than 50,000. And then an additional year is granted for organizations serving populations smaller than 50,000. The regulations do include a few exemptions that are important to be aware of. Those exemptions, we won't go into them in crazy amount of detail here, but just super high level. They include archived web content. So content that's no longer being actively used or maintained, it has to be in a dedicated archive portion of the website. As soon as it is updated or changed, it's no longer considered archive. It therefore doesn't qualify for this exception. Pre-existing files posted before the effective date. So if a file was created, say meeting minutes was created before the compliance date, that file is not being updated or changed, it's not required to access a service, that file would be exempt. Pre-existing social media posts, so any social media content that was created before the compliance date is exempt as well. Password protected or personalized documents. So imagine a water department generates a PDF document for a homeowner that is their one individual water bill. That PDF document is exempt because in order to access it, you have to log in and it only pertains to one individual. So it's individual password protected documents that are exempt. And then independent third-party content, probably the one that I think causes the most confusion. What this is talking about is content that is created on and covered entity's website or app or property, but not by that actual entity. So imagine I'm from Missoula, Montana. If the city of Missoula sets up an online discussion board for citizens to go and post, the discussion board has to be accessible under these regulations. If a citizen goes and posts on that discussion board, that post posted by an independent citizen is exempt under this exception here. So those are just a highlight of the exceptions that are included under those Title II regulations as well. And with that, I believe I will hand it back to Amy.
Yes, indeed. All right. Thanks so much, AP. So that's a quick run through of what Title II looks like. I am going to stop sharing my slides here so that we can kind of come out and just have a discussion about Title II and how, well, more specifically, I guess, HB 211110, which again mirrors Title II, and how Brian and his team prepared for this and kind of what made them successful. So, Brian, I'll go ahead and start with what were the cornerstones of the plan that you rolled out in Colorado to help entities get where they needed to be against this law?
You bet. Thanks, Amy. My small disclaimer, right? I am not an attorney by trade, and I do encourage everyone to talk with your organization or your legal counsel about your specific situations as related to accessibility laws, rules, and legislation. But here at the state of Colorado, we're dedicated, right, to making state government digital products and services accessible to everyone. Inaccessible technology can interfere with an individual's ability to obtain and use information quickly and easily. We all appreciate that when working with government. So when our digital services are inaccessible, we unfairly exclude people who need to access that information or service. So accessibility, right? It's a commitment to providing equitable access to your services, not an item on a project checklist. It's the responsibility of each employee and not a single person, team, or agency. So for us, when we rolled this out, we've had a few waves of legislation, an initial bill, a cleanup bill, some rules that have been promulgated with the Secretary of State, but we guided agencies around some core criteria to focus on. There are about 6 of them. And we looked at those and defined them as evaluation initially, right? What have we got? What is our inventory of digital products? We looked at governance, how you define and control this work at your agency. We then looked at, of course, communications, right? Including change management. That's a big piece of it. Also with the core criteria were skills, right? Employees are aware of expectations and they're trained for what they need to do in their job or role. The remaining 2, we had IT product roles. So if you think product owners, subject matter experts, maybe your development teams, people that are involved with the SDLC or the software development lifecycle. And lastly, procurement, right? How you purchase accessible goods and services working with vendors. So I can expand and elaborate a bit on those core criteria, but you might consider before implementing anything, give plenty of thought to buy-in, right? If you're at the beginning of this journey, do you have executive or leadership support? Do staff understand the why around this work, right? Is there empathy involved? They understand why it's important. Maybe is it appropriate or necessary to adopt or establish policies or charters that shows what needs to happen to support this work. And from there, we want to ensure a thorough, current, and accurate inventory of IT products is in place and look at training and skills for all employees so they understand how this work impacts everyone, whether it's something simple like word processing or building a mobile app. You want to include your procurement team so they understand how boilerplate language and terms and conditions are included in contracts and purchase orders, and utilize your comms team, your communications team, and traditional strategies to ensure messaging is clear and consistent, right? So when we launched this years ago, those were a few of the areas that we started. And then, of course, things tangent from there and they start to grow out from some of those core criteria areas.
Awesome. That's great, Brian. That's really helpful and appreciate kind of you breaking that down. Obviously, there's a lot there to that plan, but can you talk a little bit about, what made it successful? Where did y'all find success through this plan?
Absolutely, Amy. Over the years, I think one of the biggest things that comes to mind, and I put in my notes, is incremental progress, right? So after getting a handle on all the fundamentals and a lot of what I just mentioned, because it's a lot, staff across these agencies or organizations, they were better equipped to have conversations about where to go next. They understand terms like alternative or alt text, tab sequence, semantic structure like headings, and these technical terms. And that naturally led to the ability to understand what you might be testing for and how to interpret those results, maybe how to fix something. So again, with success, it's progress over perfection. I might say that 3 times here this afternoon because it's really
Yeah.
an important one. But it's some of the most accomplished organizations I've worked with. They've followed this plan or formula, right? Leaders and executives endorsed and supported this work. Time was spent confirming a current and accurate inventory of digital products. Comms tactics, again, generate awareness and even desire among staff. Training materials are refined and launched and made available. And then the technical work of auditing, testing, remediating, or fixing things began. So lastly, they've maintained this kind of marathon mentality, right? They realize that while we can't fix everything overnight, they've confirmed an ongoing commitment to not only existing products, but those that they'll build tomorrow, next week, next month, and in the years to come, right? So again, seeing that digital accessibility mentality is now part of their operating models, and this contributes to their program's success.
Yeah, absolutely. So celebrate the small wins, it sounds like.
For sure.
That's a big piece of accessibility for sure. As you think about your experience preparing for the state of Colorado for compliance and state laws, what was most difficult to prepare for?
I think looking back when this all landed for my partners and agencies, organizations I work with, this was more work on already full plates. Most people, and I'm sure everyone on the call, is already asked to do a lot. And this came as additional work, right? When our legislation came into focus in Colorado, preparing for deadlines was frequently cited as a source of anxiety and concern and added stress when thinking about prioritizing items and taking those baby steps that you could build on, right? Once you've got your handle on some of the fundamentals, it's easier to kind of build from those keystone pieces. So with the overwhelming nature of this new priority, right, this new ask, I had a lot of conversations about just where to begin.
Yeah, absolutely. And having worked with a lot of municipalities here in Colorado, I can echo that sentiment for sure. What was most achievable? What felt most achievable for these entities as you got started?
I think from the get-go, training and websites. So when it comes to generating awareness and getting a handle on the fundamentals of digital accessibility, you don't have to reinvent the wheel, right? There's so many resources that are out there. You can access those in many places, and many of them are available at no cost, right? So you'll find what suits your agency best. That might be curated content or consultative partners that you can bring in. But websites, right? They're really ubiquitous and really relatable as a common modern way that we offer services and convey information. So there's a host of tools that can be used to evaluate websites and pages for accessibility. And these tools can find persistent repeated failures, which in many cases can be fixed in bulk by utilizing templates, CSS or cascading style sheets, or simple code fixes, right? So many agencies have someone that's knowledgeable and responsible for website material, given that it's such a pillar of modern digital communication. It's one area where people were able to relate and jump in. So really thinking about training and some of those websites and all of the
Hmm.
things that you put on websites, including documents,
Yeah,
those seem to be where people gravitated towards. Let's start there and let's start
yeah,
to knock some things down and get some wins.
yeah, absolutely. And was there anything in that process that was surprising to you?
Oh, a few things along the way, but I think primarily just how difficult it can be to govern and operationalize this work at a large agency.
Hmm.
They don't have to be large agencies. Much of the work to test and audit technology for accessibility can be pretty straightforward. It can be linear, it can be pass fail, it can be binary, right? But integrating accessibility into all aspects of an agency's workflows is a little more complex. So with that, I was really amazed at just how many people showed true interest in this work. Some of them shared that they had a hidden disability or even had a family member that experienced a barrier to working with a service or a product that we offered at a government level. So it was wonderful to see how many employees embraced not only the idea of doing the right thing, but evolving the way that they do their work to consider how every user accesses information and services.
Yeah, that's amazing. I talk a lot and think a lot about driving cultural change at organizations to drive accessibility. And so I love that from the other perspective that you were surprised by how many people were really excited to jump in and get involved. That's really, that's heartening. Okay, so were you focused on obviously Title II has requirements around documents, it has requirements around websites, it has requirements around procurement and the vendors that you work with. Where did you start with your focus? Were you focused on all of the above? Did you start in one place and kind of work your way through? What did that process look like?
Yeah, you bet. Given the similarities, right, between Colorado's legislation and the forthcoming federal ADA Title II rules, I usually think about what did we focus on? I usually mention the big three, right? Documents, websites, and apps or applications. So documents, right? It's not only word processing things like Microsoft Word, stuff from Office. You might be a Google Cloud platform, so you're using Google Docs. You can think about, of course, Adobe Acrobat PDFs, very common, right? But also, spreadsheets and slide decks fall in there as well. Websites, pretty straightforward and all the pages that go with them. But applications, they can be static, they can be dynamic, but these are usually the products that we focus on. And they were all under the umbrella. So one of the bigger questions we got was, well, this is just used internally inside my agency. And Brian, as a citizen developer back in his day, had a real experience where I built something, low code, no code environment that didn't pass accessibility standards. And I had a colleague that used assistive technology. And I said, wow, you're not able to use something. And this is internal, right? It's not public facing. And
Mhm.
so that launched part of my journey to say, hey, everyone counts or no one counts. We're going to get this right. And it was a better user experience across the board, right? So everything under the umbrella, counts. And you'll want to think about all of those different products. As we look ahead to 2027 and beyond, technology touches just about everything. We use it every day in myriad ways. So with those typical items, you of course have factors like policy, standard operating procedures, skills and training, again, communications I've mentioned a lot, and procurement that apply to organizations. Those criteria, those key areas are all going to affect all the different technology that you touch.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned procurement there. Um, can you tell me a little bit about what role accessibility plays in procurement for Colorado OIT?
You bet. It can be a kind of a slippery run, right? It's kind of its own lane, but procurement criteria ensures that your agency is doing things like reviewing and validating boilerplate or contract language in documents like contracts and purchase orders. It also means that accessibility is considered early on in things like solicitations. You might do requests for proposals or requests for bids when you're working with a vendor in a competitive bidding process. Your organization wants potential vendors, right, to know that they're expected to understand accessibility and deliver accessible solutions, right? So this ensures accessibility standards, compliance, and a commitment by the vendor to accessibility, not just at the beginning, but for the life of the product, right? So many times we have new releases and things change. So it's an ongoing kind of commitment to procurement. This should really be done for both vendor products and vendor development services. Sometimes they deliver a product, sometimes it's a service. They may manage your website for you. If they do, you'd expect them to be very familiar with things like the WCAG 2.1 AA standard.
Yeah, you'd certainly hope so. Awesome. Thanks, Brian. So who owns accessibility at OIT?
Amy knows she can guess this one. The short answer is everyone, right? In
Everyone.
all organizations, right? I see this with vendors that we work with, and certainly across every agency, large and small. We all kind of agree on that. Again, everyone's using technology. So those with high touch point, high visibility documents, websites, and applications tend to have a greater responsibility or maybe more focus and accountability for their products, right? If they're heavily used, they might rise to the top of your priority list.
Yeah.
In a perfect world, along with all the other items that need attention, executive staff and leaders are showing that they care about accessibility and they endorse it. So you're seeing that at the top level, right? So this looks like including alt text and images in agency-wide materials, right? Emails, intranet pages. They may give thought to providing captions and transcripts for meetings and all staff videos where they're sharing information, and asking teams to consider accessibility at the beginning of projects, not just the end. So accessibility touches not simply teams that manage websites, but maybe human resources, or admin staff that create documents, accounting staff that process payments. As we mentioned earlier, procurement and communication teams as well. It's across
Yeah.
the board. Yeah.
It's across the board. It's everyone's responsibility. I have been saying for 2 years now, probably my most used phrase is we all work in accessibility now. So it is all of our weight to carry together. How important is that buy-in from leadership in order to build out an accessibility program?
It's paramount, right? And it's also challenging because if everything's a priority, sometimes nothing can be a priority. So our leaders are asked to do a lot. But what I've seen be successful is a healthy dose of visible endorsement. Many agencies, offices, and divisions struggle to prioritize or even pay mind to this work in their daily efforts. Again, full plates, people asked to do a lot. But leadership and governance is modeled, from the top down. So you can think about things like appointing an accessibility champion, that person that is a North Star, someone that staff can look to, someone that has authority, and employees can reach out for guidance and support. You want to maybe have, if you can, visible executive buy-in. These culture shifts when leadership mentions accessibility in general meetings and not just in IT specific discussions, right? I think about transparency as accountability. So encourage agencies to publish an accessibility statement, right, on a public facing site, let's say, for example, and have that plan available. It signals and demonstrates to the public as well as employees in your agency that you're committed to growth, right? You're not going to get this right out the gate. You're not going to do it overnight, but it's this ongoing commitment. Again, progress over perfection. I can mention a quick kind of, both sides of the coin. Over the last 3 years, I've seen an agency that had this leadership buy-in and endorsement that came early and often, and they've risen to the top as a leader in digital accessibility compliance with a thorough and mature model for this work. At another agency, challenges with turnover and lack of sustained support for the work, it yielded, less than desired outcomes. It's an incomplete inventory. It might look like inaccessible products or staff that are confused or indifferent or nonplussed about what the plan is for digital accessibility. You may find yourself at one end of that spectrum, or as you take on some of this work, you find that it is a bit of an up and down. It can come in waves. And in both instances, I'd consider the agencies to be successful. It's just that they had to look at some of the ways that they get the work done day in and day out.
Yeah, absolutely. Many roads lead to the mountaintop, but having that executive buy-in is definitely gonna mean you're taking a less rocky path for sure. And last couple of questions for you here. What's your advice for creating a culture of accessibility, Brian?
Yeah, you bet. That goal, Amy, I always kind of characterize that as a shift in perspective from compliance as a checkbox to accessibility as a core value. So that foundational mindset, right? Again, progress over perfection. But if you're an agency that's just starting, the fear of doing it wrong can really lead to paralysis. I would discourage that. I wouldn't worry as much about that. And what I've found in my work with anyone in the disability community is how much they appreciate the efforts. Again, myself got things wrong in a prior career, and yet I didn't know what I didn't know. So I jumped in, I learned, and I started doing things differently. So again, this accessibility is a journey, not a project. There's not a done state. We have iterative technology that's changing, it seems like every day. So not a one-time audit, but a continuous improvement cycle. It's a great cultural piece. If you're familiar with the electronic curb cut effect, right? You can remind people that accessible design improves the experience for everyone, just like how sidewalk ramps helped people with strollers or luggage or riding a bicycle, not just wheelchair users that was designed for. If you've heard the somewhat buzz phrase shift left, right? This is the idea in terms of the software development life cycle, right? You're on the left side of the spectrum. You're encouraging moving accessibility checks to the very beginning of the process in the design and requirements phases rather than bolting it on at the end, right? Which is more expensive and less effective.
Mhm.
I have a few other notes. I think about like role specific training in your culture. You can have general overall training, but think about what people are actually doing day in and day out and get them the specific training that they need there. Communities of practice, right, are a really great way to go. Having an internal accessibility forum for employees across your departments to share tips, tools, success stories, experiences, and inclusive hiring, right? Remind them that a truly accessible culture includes hiring people with disabilities. So internal accessibility is just important as external facing websites.
Absolutely. I love that. And I want to make sure we're saving some time at the end here. So one last question very quickly. We have a lot of people on the line who are probably in different stages of their accessibility journey. If you were advising agencies that want to move their program from good to great, what would you say to them?
I like to think about that electronic curb cut, and we're all familiar, as I mentioned, the curb cut across cities worldwide, done to sidewalks, right, to assist wheelchair users. But what about closed captions? What about keyboard shortcuts or speech to text? Many users, not just those with disabilities, appreciate these features, right? So research your best practices and realize that if you design for a target demographic and you cover your accessibility laws and requirements, let's say for someone with a visual or auditory disability, you're likely to create an improved experience for all users, right? So in good organizations, accessibility is a final gate. It's a hurdle to clear before deployment. In great ones, it really starts at the ideation phase and it's considered during all phases of work. And I think smart or great organizations realize the cost factor. And whether you're in the private or public sector, fixing a bug in production and something that's live, right, is roughly 30 times more expensive than fixing it during the design phase. So lastly, when accessibility becomes part of an organization's DNA, their products and services move beyond just legal compliance and instead become perhaps delightful experiences for all users. That can be tough sometimes with government, but I'll maybe close out with a reality check. And I've found that an organization is 100% accessible at all times. And that hallmark of greatness I've found is really having a resilient process to identify, prioritize, and remediate barriers as soon as they appear.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great. And I love that. As a very faithful subtitles user, I benefit from assistive technology that wasn't necessarily designed for me. So I can definitely relate to what you're saying there. Okay. Well, thank you so much, Brian, for your insight there. Brian, for anyone who doesn't know, has been incredibly pivotal in the success of HB 211110 in Colorado. And so we are very glad to have your insights and really appreciate that. In terms of what you can do now, we want to leave you with some tangible takeaways that you can go back to your organization and say, okay, this is what we're going to do to get ready for the deadline that is 1 month away. So last minute moves for your high impact results. I'm going to have AP and Brian share some of their thoughts here. So the first excuse me, move here is conduct a rapid risk assessment of your entire digital ecosystem. AP, what do you have to say about that?
Yeah, absolutely. In order to know what the accessibility state is of your documents or your mobile applications or your website, it requires an audit. And what it ultimately requires is both automated and a live user testing audit conducted by persons with disabilities who actually use assistive technologies. The reality is that orchestrating and getting a live manual audit can take time, right? We're a month and 2 days out. And so, what can you do in the interim is leverage these automated scanning solutions, right? Lighthouse inside of Google Chrome, the Wave toolbar. Alliant has our own accessibility scanning solution. There's a lot of accessibility scanners out there. And even just taking those solutions that are free, you can get access to them right here, right now, running them on some of your common pages, right? You run an e-commerce site, run it on your homepage, run it on your product listing, your product display pages, run it on your cart and checkout, right? Automated scans are not as comprehensive as a live user audit, but it at least gives you an idea as to what the current accessibility state is right now. Second to that, what I would say is in thinking about your documents, your PDFs, your Word files, your spreadsheets, those documents that Brian talked about, right? One thing that has very much surprised me over the years while working in accessibility is, how much content can be on these digital properties that the owners don't know about or that is out of date and not really being used anymore, right? And so conducting an inventory of your electronic documents, asking the question, what's really needed here? What do we need to keep up for record keeping purposes? These documents that were created a long time ago that we have to keep online, let's move them to an archive section to leverage that exception, right? Thinking about identifying the accessibility state, locating all of your various documents, and making a plan to minimize that workload in terms of actually getting them fixed, I think is a really key step that you can do right away. Brian, any thoughts?
I think you covered a lot of the great points. A few that come to mind for me is knowledge is power. That sounds kind of cheesy, but having the totality of knowledge right before you endeavor into some of this, get a foundational understanding of what it's like to audit or test. Again, automated tools are great. Live users, right, and manual tests are generally considered a must-have for any kind of audit or testing of a system. So I'm agnostic, right? I'm pretty unbiased as far as products. There's lots out there. You'll find the right fit for your organization based on budget and availability. Some of them, that are free tools can be useful. You will find also that you'll get what you pay for. So sometimes they're freemium and you can go only so far with some of that. But to Aaron's point, it's a great way to do a representative sample across some areas. You can get your feet wet, start to understand what it's like to have results returned to you and dive deeper into some of these topics, that may be unfamiliar at first. It at least gets you going. And again, it goes hand in hand with showing that good faith effort and commitment to your organization's digital accessibility goals.
Awesome. Prioritize high impact, low effort issues first. AP, how would you advise us here?
Yeah, take the results of, if you actually manage to get a manual audit, right? Or even if all you can do between now and the deadline is run an automated accessibility scan, um, look through those results, right? Identify those issues that have the greatest impact and potentially the least amount of effort, right? So, for example, things in your site header or in your site footer, right? If you have an unlabeled home link in your site header, that unlabeled home link is present on every single page of your website, right? But in terms of the actual fix, all it is fixing one link in your template and republishing, right? That is a high impact, low effort type of accessibility issue that's perfect for getting maximum value out of limited development resources in the shortest amount of time possible. Think about leveraging the bulk remediation services, right? There are services and tools out there that can be used to rapidly remediate the accessibility of PDF and other electronic documents, right? Again, manual remediation, manual testing remains the gold standard, but that takes time, right? So leveraging bulk remediation or automated remediation, those can be great interim steps to improve the accessibility state right here, right now. Brian, any thoughts?
Just a couple, Aaron. I think I would tack on. I do agree 100%, right? Think about that prioritization list. It's okay to have some things at the bottom, right? If it's a smaller user base, there can be inherently less risk of a user running into a barrier, right? Those high visibility, high touch point things is where I might focus. And those might be internal to your organization. What are your employees using? What are your partners using a ton of, right? So think about some of those prioritizations, and I couldn't agree more as well with saying these bulk fixes. So one practical example of that for us was agencies in Colorado, right, needed to get an accessibility statement and an accommodation request form or mechanism on their web pages. It was done once at the footer of a website and it propagated across every page. So you did a couple of things there. With a bulk fix, you showed your commitment, your ongoing commitment to accessibility work in your statement, even acknowledging we may not be perfect and there's things that we're working on, constantly, but you also gave a mechanism, right? Usually more than one is great. So perhaps a digital form and an email address for a user to reach out if they do hit or encounter a barrier to one of your products or services.
Amazing. And I think right in line with what Brian just shared in terms of creating a plan, document your commitment to accessibility. AP, talk to us about how we can be documenting and showing our commitment.
Yeah, absolutely. There are three key things that I would recommend to any website owner. Just as a way of showing that you have accessibility on your radar, you are taking it seriously, you have a commitment to improving the accessibility state of your website, right? Including a skip to main content link, right? It's a very quick and easy thing to test, right? So it's good to have a skip to main content link. But along with that, having an accessibility statement, as Brian just mentioned, usually they're found in the footer, right? An accessibility link. Sometimes some websites will have links to it both in the header and the footer. Either way is fine. But having an actual accessibility statement available from any page on your website via that one clickable link that outlines your accessibility commitment. What is the accessibility standard you are holding yourself to? What are some known accessibility issues that are present on the site if you happen to know about any specifically? And what mechanisms can users do or take? What steps can they take if they encounter a barrier that prevents them from being able to use it, right? Do you have a contact phone number? Do you have an email address? Do you have a form that can be filled out for those users to be able to request assistance? It's really important to have that commitment outlined there. Another thing is having a badge, right? We think about it all the time in terms of web security, right? The little padlock icon, or for businesses, you might have Better Business Bureau icons. Websites have tons of little icons that validate security certifications, business practices, compliance standards, that type of thing. Have one for your accessibility, right? An actual badge on your website that indicates I am working with a reputable accessibility vendor. They have reviewed this already. We're certified or we're in progress, whatever it might be. But a badge can really help underscore that commitment that you're already taking. Another thing I would say on this front is document, right? At Alliant, our Alliant platform for our clients, any accessibility work that they do, whether we're talking website audits, mobile app audits, litigation support services, you name it, it gets tracked in the Alliant platform. And this is why, right? Because at any point in time, you can generate a report. We call it a timeline of accessibility activities that outlines all the steps you've done to achieve and maintain conformance with accessibility requirements. And so that's really essential to underscore that good faith effort because nobody is perfect. As Brian said, there is no done state, there is no such thing as perfection. It's all about demonstrating that progress, that ongoing good faith effort, and providing those mechanisms for when accessibility doesn't happen to be there. Brian, any thoughts?
Not much to add. Maybe a couple things that I've recommended with partners, right? Is walking that talk. Like, we're doing it. We're doing accessibility. Oh yeah? Well, what if I pulled that thread? What have you done? Well, a couple of examples. We put training out there and every employee took it, or I got 90% and I'm working on the other 10%. That's huge. You've got people aware and they've taken that training. Maybe you've updated your procurement SOPs, right? Your operating procedures, your procurement desk manuals for staff that they are reminded, in the processes to think about including accessibility in their work. Maybe you're keeping a sheet, right? Your plan of your websites and what their status is as far as testing or auditing for the accessibility with plans, right? Have that plan, do write some of these things down so they can be demonstrated. And it doesn't have to be, overblown and magnificent, but it should be a little bit more in the back of a cocktail envelope. There's myriad tools out there you can use, right, to put things into plans and update the status and give it some attention. If it's not every day, maybe each week or each month, certainly each quarter with the progress that you're making in your plan.
Amazing. Sounds good. Whoops. Sorry about that. And I think this is our last one here is, and to Brian's point, evaluate integrated third-party products and procurement processes. AB, talk to us a little bit about procurement.
Yeah, procurement is a very tough topic. I can do an hour-long presentation talking about procurement accessibility pretty easily. We do it all the time. The thing about procurement is, it's easy to say the goal, we want to procure accessible software, right? But in reality, there is no such thing as perfection, right? There is not going to be a product that is 100% accessible that is going to fully meet your business needs, right? So yes, it's about procuring the most accessible option that you can, but also procuring the one that is the most accessible while still meeting your business needs, right? And it's about understanding what the accessibility state of that software is before you buy it. It's about getting contract language. So if accessibility issues do come up later on down the road, you have a mechanism to hold the vendor accountable to get them to actually address the issue, right? It's about discussing risk. What is the risk of us purchasing this inaccessible piece of software, right? If it's a single piece of software, maybe it's used to control a microscope. It's only going to be used by a couple of folks in a biology lab. That is probably lower risk than when you are procuring a new student information system, right? That is going to be used by everybody across campus. And so really it's just about taking these comprehensive steps to understand what the accessibility state is, what that risk is, protect yourself, have a plan in place. When I was at the University of Montana, we called it an equally effective alternative access plan, right? What do we do if somebody needs to use the software and they can't because of accessibility issues, right? Having that documentation in place. And then again, if it comes down to an OCR complaint, whatever it might be, that inaccessible software gets called out, you can show you conducted the due diligence on it. You already have a plan in place to accommodate users who are affected by that inaccessible software, and you've covered yourself really as best as you can. Brian, any thoughts on that you want to add?
Covered it pretty well, AP. I think in terms of working with vendors, a lot of it is in how you deploy or implement that solution, right? Tableau and Salesforce, very large corporations, they're used worldwide, but how you implement those or configure some of those products are at your fingertips. So yes, it may be something that when you're working with a vendor, ask them to demonstrate. What's your knowledge of accessibility? Here on the slide, we mentioned the VPATs or the voluntary product accessibility templates. Sometimes they're accessibility conformance reports. Are they aware of these things, right? And maybe they're a trusted partner and they're on this journey with you and they're getting there. But seeing that demonstrated, I think about some of these large companies. I go out, I look, do they have a page that talks about the accessibility efforts for their product? Right. When you see that, that's a great indicator, right? That they're probably on this journey, this marathon mentality of making things better through each release or each iteration of their product. I know a number of resources will get shared, but I rely on like a vendor checklist and some things to ask vendors. So that'll be coming out after today's webinar and could be pretty useful for what is a pretty tricky topic around procurement and third-party products. Yeah.
Yeah,
Amazing.
one thing I might just chime in regards to VPATs and ACRs, because those are kind of the standard accessibility documentation one gets from a vendor during the procurement cycle. And something that we always like to say during our procurement sessions is look beyond supports, right? VPATs, the V stands for voluntary right out of the gate, right? So it's important to keep that in mind. It's important to look to see who made the VPAT. Was it done by a third party vendor? Is it VPAT accurate or I'm sorry, is it recent, right? A 2 or 3 year old VPAT, probably out of date. What software version is it referring to? And then just understanding that you're not necessarily expecting a VPAT that says supports on every single requirement. As lovely as that would be, we all know, and we've said it throughout the session, there is no such thing as perfection, right? If you go and you look at VPATs for Microsoft Word, Google Docs, PowerPoint, all these tools that all of us, including myself as a blind screen reader user, use on a daily basis, look at their VPATs and you will find a combination of supports and partially supports and does not support with detailed comments, right? That really is what you want to see. That is the sign of an honest and mature accessibility program. To me, it's an automatic red flag if I look at a VPAT and it just says we support everything, right? So always like to point that out about the VPATs. Amy?
That's helpful. Yeah, we could definitely go a mile deep and a mile wide on just procurement alone, but recognizing that we have about 10 minutes left here, we want to go through a few last things that you can do. So the next is catch up on your backlog. AP, quickly walk us through what we can do to catch up on our backlog.
Yeah, again, prioritizing those accessibility issues, archiving any content that you're able to do, it'll help you reduce the amount of work that you need to do. Start that remediation work that based on the automated scanning that you conduct. Conduct a manual accessibility audit. Again, 1 month and 2 days. If you're in that deadline that's coming up, probably going to be hard to get a manual audit done between now and that deadline. But ultimately, that's what you want to do. The automated scanning results just kind of get the ball rolling. Long term, you want that live user testing conducted by users with assistive technologies, because that's what's going to actually identify the broadest range of issues. That's what will actually ensure that your site is not just conformant, but also is usable, right? And that is an important thing. Look at PDF accessibility software long term, right? The best solution for long term document accessibility is implementing tools and training and practices to make sure that documents that you create on a go forward basis are accessible, right? So look into the tools necessary to be able to do that. And then set up an alternative format process, right? We talked about accessibility statements, having that process in place for users to be able to request accommodations, alternative formats, right? Getting a process in place for requesting something like Braille, reflowed large print, that also takes time, right? So making sure that you have the process already in place, a relationship with a reputable vendor to do those alternative formats when the request comes in is really going to be vital as well to make sure you can quickly respond when those accommodation requests arrive. Brian, any thoughts?
Nothing on this one. I endorse all of that.
Amazing. Brian is on board with us staying on time here. So last, I think, couple of slides here, create a long-term accessibility plan. What can we do in the next month in terms of long-term planning, AP?
Standardizing your templates, minimizing the number of templates. One thing we found at Alliant was we had a ton of templates that did largely the exact same thing, but with very, very slight differences, right? So consolidating those templates, ensuring that those templates were accessible was a really great way to improve accessibility across a wide range of documents that we create. Same with auditing components, right? Your design system. If you have a design system that you use for adding carousels, dialogues, things like that, focusing on component level audit results and remediation is another fantastic way to get kind of maximum value for your development dollar, so to speak. Amy, pass it back to you. Or actually,
Amazing.
Brian, I apologize. Anything you want to
Brian.
add on this one?
No worries. I'd really second the idea of templates. I was never in this habit, and now if I have to create a slide deck, I do not create one from scratch. I grab the one that has been built by my organization and is templated out, and then I configure it for what I need. That applies with slide decks as well as documents. It can apply to spreadsheets, things like that. That long-term mentality, celebrate successes so that they're contagious and they grow across your organization, and people start behaving in some of those ways where accessibility is included in each task or throughout the life cycle. The shift left mentality, right, where your thing you build next week or next year has accessibility factored in at the beginning.
I love it. I love it so much. We, I think, probably don't have a whole lot of time for Q&A here. So I am actually going to commit to us answering all of your questions. I know there are some fabulous questions in the Q&A box, and I really appreciate you inputting those. We will answer those directly in follow-up. So look for an email from us. We will get back to you on those questions. One last bit from me here. We try really hard to make these webinars as informative as we can. We want to make sure we leave you with takeaways that are going to be universal and going to be beneficial to you as you're in crunch mode getting ready for this deadline. But I also think that we have a responsibility to let you know how we at Alliant can help. So we do operate across digital, PDF, and alt format. So in terms of digital, we can help with VPAC creation. We can help with manual auditing rather of your website. In the PDF space, we do remediation services. So we do them both in a bulk format and manually. And then we also have Common Look software, which is going to allow you to remediate and author documents accessibly. I know we have a lot of education people in the room today, and we do have a Common Look EDU that is specific to education needs. And lastly, we do have alternative format and braille printing capability. So please reach out to us. Find us at alliant.com. Fill out the questionnaire there if you would like more information on any of these services. And ultimately, thank you so much to everyone who joined today. Thank you, Brian and AP. Brian joined us on opening day for the Dodgers, so he had to split his focus a little bit. But I think it's going to give his team good luck today. So thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. We hope you'll join us again soon. And yeah, we'll answer your questions and follow up.
Thanks,
Thank you all
everyone.
so much for joining.